always blown my mind how somebody could have taken this and turned them into one of the most delicious and iconic dishes in the world. We're talking about French onion soup. Today we're going to make one of my favorite dishes. Deeply caramelized onions, a little bit of bacon, garlic bread croutons, and delicious melted crispy cheese on top. So tag along and let's make it. For this recipe, we'll start with 4 medium-sized onions. We'll take the top off and the bottom off. After we've removed the bottom and top of our onions, we'll cut them in half. That's to make sure the peeling of our onions is made easier for us. Once all of our onions are cut in half, we'll start removing the skin. Now don't worry if you take off an extra layer. It won't hurt and you can always use it for a stock. We'll continue to remove the skin until every single onion half is skinless. We'll tidy up our cutting board to make sure we're working on a clean surface. And then we'll start chopping. We'll start with our knife in a very steep angle like that. We want to follow the natural curvature of the onion. Once we're about halfway through chopping the onion, we flip it on its side and continue chopping. This is to ensure we always have a flat surface to work on so our onion doesn't move around. You don't have to stress out about every single sliver being the same thickness. After all, we're gonna cook these onions down into oblivion. And now it's time to take care of our bacon. Take about 3 ounces or 90 grams of double smoked bacon and cut them into evenly sized pieces. Now once again, that bacon's going to cook down, it's going to render down, and your pieces aren't going to be even at the end of the day, but we're trying to be pros here, so let's cut that bacon into even pieces. And there you have it, onions and bacon ready to go. In a heavy bottom pan set to medium-high heat, you want to add about 2 ounces or 60 grams of regular butter. Once all of your butter is melted, but right before it starts getting any color, you're going to want to add your bacon. Then she goes, all in at once. Once your bacon's in the pot, give it a good stir. Make sure it all gets coated with that hot butter so it starts cooking and rendering out some of its fat. After a few minutes, you want to stir your bacon up. Make sure it doesn't burn. Make sure it keeps on rendering that delicious fat. Once your bacon starts getting a little bit of color, you don't want it to brown, just a little bit of color, you want to add your onions. Now, if your pot fits all the onions at once, great. If not, add them a little bit, give it a little stir, add some more, and repeat this process until all of your onions are in the pot. Now that all of your onions are in the pot, you want to give it a little stir. Make sure they're all covered with butter and bacon fat. Turn your heat down to a low heat and walk away for a few minutes. After about 5 to 10 minutes, come back to your onions and give them a stir. Make sure you stir them well so they cook evenly. The last thing you want is for the bottom of the pot to start burning and the onions on the top to be raw. Want to stir them every 5 to 10 minutes. And remember, low and slow is the name of the game. After about half an hour of cooking, your onions will start to get a little bit of color and will have reduced significantly in size. After about an hour and a half, all of the sugar in the onions will be released and they'll start to caramelize. This is about half an hour into the cooking process. This is about 50 minutes into the cooking process, and this is what you're looking for. About an hour and 15 minutes of low and slow. Now that your onions are caramelized, we're going to deglaze with 2 ounces or 60 milliliters of red wine. We want to make sure that red wine is completely evaporated before we add 60 milliliters or 2 ounces of balsamic vinegar. We'll repeat this process. Make sure all the liquid is evaporated and the bottom of your pot looks dry. Now that you've got caramelized onions that have been deglazed, you'll want to add 1 liter of either chicken or beef stock. Here I'm using dark chicken stock because I find it has a milder flavor, which I enjoy better with my French onion soup. If you'd like to see how I make my chicken stock, hit the link in the description below. Now last but not least, we'll be adding 2 sprigs of thyme. It is important to remember the aromatics that you're adding and the quantity so you can remove them later in the cooking process. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but last time I checked, nobody wants to be chewing on pieces of thyme. And that's it. Now we just gotta let this simmer away for half an hour to 45 minutes. After our soup's been simmering for about half an hour to 45 minutes, it's really developed all that flavor, it's time to season. Be generous with your salt. This is a pretty bland soup at this point. Same with pepper. We want some of that sweetness from the onions, that savoriness from the bacon, that saltiness from, well, the salt. But we also want a little bit of a kick. That'll come from the black pepper. Try your soup. If it needs any more seasoning, go right ahead. Ew, that's gross. He's using the same spoon, trying his soup, using that same spoon again to stir it. Well, this soup's so delicious I won't be sharing with anyone. Now that your soup is fully seasoned, you want to fish out those aromatics. Now, I remember I added 2 sprigs of thyme here, so I know I only gotta take 2. But if you add any more aromatics, make sure you take them all out. Alright, should we check out the color of this delicious French onion soup? Let's see what it looks like. Delicious, brown, properly caramelized onions. So take your time, caramelize them properly, and do not mess this up. Now at this point, you can take a couple slices of baguette, toast them up, and call it a day. But we're here to make a good onion soup, not a mediocre one. In a small pot set to medium heat, we're going to add about 2 ounces or 60 grams of butter. Take 3 garlic cloves and slice them thinly. Once all of your garlic is sliced, toss it into the melted butter. Remember, you want this butter to be over medium heat. Now onto the parsley. Take a small bunch of parsley and wrap it into a tight bundle. This is the best way to chop herbs. You have way more control over where the parsley leaves are going. Once all of the parsley is chopped, you want to add it to your butter that's been simmering away with your garlic cloves. I prefer to use a baguette for this recipe. You can definitely use some sourdough, brioche, or whatever your favorite bread might be. We're going to cut this bread into small cubes. Remember, we're trying to make croutons here. We don't want slices. Now, I personally prefer croutons because you can scatter them throughout the entire surface of your soup rather than just having 2 pieces of bread floating on your soup. Most importantly, this is a soup. You shouldn't have to be cutting anything. You shouldn't have to be cutting the slices of bread you put on your soup. Once you got all your bread cut into cubes, you want to put them in a mixing bowl so we can toss them with that delicious butter that's been cooking away while we cut our bread. Now that our butter is infused with that garlic and parsley, pour it all over your bread. Give that bread a little toss to make sure it's all evenly coated with the garlic butter, and put them on a baking sheet that's been lined with parchment paper. Scrape off all the pieces to make sure you get all that butter on the bread. Try one for good measure. Next, we're going to bake them in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 15 minutes. Alright, there's all our components. We have our soup, garlic bread croutons, and Swiss cheese. We want to ladle our soup into an oven-proof container. The lid's about half an inch from the top. We want to make sure we leave enough room for those delicious croutons. we're going to grab as many croutons as we can fit on the surface of that soup and scatter them evenly. Now, I like to use sliced cheese because I can drape it over and I don't have to worry about some of the croutons burning before the cheese melts and gets crispy. Pop that bad boy into a very hot oven or an oven with a broiler on until they look like this. I mean, come on, look at that crispy melted cheese. Alright, and there you have it, a delicious French onion soup with deeply caramelized onions, delicious garlic bread croutons, crispy cheese, just to die for. Comment below what you think I should make next. Like this video, subscribe, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.